When I was 18, I believed education could change everything. My mom encouraged me to follow my dream of studying art and digital design, but my dad, he thought it was the stupidest idea in the world. Art? What are you going to do? Paint pictures in the basement and starve? He scoffed when I showed him my college acceptance letter. Every holiday dinner, every family gathering, he repeated the same joke. My daughter is paying thousands of dollars to learn how to draw stick figures. Everyone laughed except me and Mom. Still, I worked 2 part-time jobs and took out loans to pay for school. My dad refused to help. He said if I wanted to waste money, I should waste my own. I remember nights when I came home exhausted from waiting tables, only to find him watching TV, sipping beer, and making another remark like, "One day you'll regret not studying something real, like law or engineering." The thing is, I loved what I was doing. I love creating. I started designing logos for local cafes, album covers for indie bands, and posters for community events. Slowly, people began paying me. Small amounts at first, but enough to give me hope. When I graduated, Dad didn't even attend the ceremony. He said he had better things to do than clap for a useless degree. That was the day I promised myself I would prove him wrong, not by arguing, but by living. And I did. Within 5 years, my little freelance work turned into a boutique creative agency. I hired a team. I built connections with tech startups and international clients. By my late 20s, my company was generating more than my dad ever earned in his entire career. The sweetest part, I bought Mom a cozy house in the countryside, away from Dad's constant negativity. She cried when I gave her the keys. Dad, of course, called it a waste of money and claimed she didn't need it. But I knew better. For the first time in my life, I felt proud of myself, until the day Dad showed up at my office, uninvited, with a look on his face I'll never forget. He wasn't there to congratulate me. He was there to make a demand. I still remember the moment clearly. I was sitting in my glass-walled office, reviewing a client proposal, when the receptionist buzzed me. Your father is here," she said hesitantly, as if she wasn't sure she should let him in. My chest tightened. Dad had never stepped foot in my office. He had never once asked about my work. I told her to send him in, trying to steady my breathing. He walked in like he owned the place, glancing around at the minimalist decor and shelves full of design awards. "Not bad," he muttered, running his hand over the polished desk. "I guess this is what comes from all that doodling." I didn't respond. I just asked, "What do you want, Dad?" He sat down across from me, leaned back in the chair, and gave me a look that mixed annoyance with entitlement. "I've been thinking," he started. "You wouldn't have any of this if it weren't for me." I blinked. "Excuse me. I raised you, didn't I? Put food on the table, paid the bills, kept a roof over your head. You wouldn't be here without me. And now that you've made it big, I think it's only fair that I get my share." I stared at him, my mouth dry. "Your share? What do you mean?" "Half," he said calmly, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. "I want half of everything you've built. This company, the house you bought your mom, the savings you've got. Half. That's what you owe me." For a moment, I thought he was joking. I actually laughed, but the cold look in his eyes told me he was dead serious. "Dad," I said slowly, "you spent years mocking my degree. You told me I was wasting my life. You didn't even help me through college. And now you want half." He leaned forward, his voice sharp. "Don't talk to me like that. You think you did all this alone. If it weren't for me working all those years, you wouldn't have had the chance to go to school at all. I sacrificed for you, and now it's time you repay the debt." It was surreal. My own father, the man who had humiliated me at every opportunity, was sitting in front of me, demanding ownership of my life's work. But what shocked me most wasn't his words. It was that he had a plan to back them up. Dad slid a folded stack of papers across my desk. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice carried a strange confidence. "I already spoke to a lawyer," he said. "This isn't just me asking nicely. Legally, I can make a case. You were under my roof until you graduated. I invested in you. That makes me a stakeholder." I picked up the papers, scanning them. It was some half-baked draft filled with legal jargon, clearly something he'd pieced together after Googling parent rights to adult children's income. But the bold line stood out, claim for financial compensation based on parental support and dependency. I put the papers down carefully. "This isn't real. You can't actually take my business, Dad." He smirked. You'd be surprised what courts consider fair. And besides, do you really want to drag our family name through the mud? Do you want people to know you're refusing to take care of your father after all he's done for you? My blood boiled. Done for me? You mean the years you mocked me in front of relatives? The nights I cried myself to sleep because you said I'd never make it? The time you told me my degree was worth less than a napkin? That's your contribution. He shrugged, unfazed. Tough love made you strong. You should be thanking me. Look where you are now. And now it's time you give back. I felt my stomach twist. He wasn't going to let this go. And deep down I realized it wasn't about money alone. It was about control. He hated that I had proven him wrong. He couldn't stand that I had built something successful without his blessing. Dad, I said firmly, you're not entitled to a dime of what I built. If you go through with this, you'll only embarrass yourself. His jaw tightened. Don't test me. You think money makes you untouchable, but family is blood. And blood comes first. I wanted to throw him out right then, but before I could, the office door opened. It was my mom. And the look on her face told me she knew exactly why Dad was here. Mom froze in the doorway, clutching her purse as if she had walked straight into a storm. Her eyes flicked from me to the papers on the desk, then back to Dad. You didn't, she whispered. Dad leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. I did. Someone has to keep this family balanced. She wouldn't have anything without me. Mom's face went pale. She stepped inside, closed the door, and set her purse down. You've lost your mind, she said quietly, but her voice shook. You didn't believe in her. You didn't support her. And now you want to take her success away. She owes me, Dad barked. Don't act like I wasn't there. Who paid for the groceries? Who kept the lights on? Who made sure she got through school alive? You mean while you mocked her every single day? Mom's tone hardened. While you told her she was wasting her life. I remember those nights, Richard. She cried to me in the kitchen when you laughed at her degree. Dad rolled his eyes. Oh, stop being dramatic. I pushed her. That's why she made it. I stood there, heart racing, torn between anger and disbelief. For the first time, Mom was standing up to him, not with quiet sighs or gentle words, but with fire. You didn't push her, Mom snapped. You tried to break her. And the only reason she succeeded was because she refused to let you be right. Dad's face darkened. Enough. This is between me and my daughter. But Mom slammed her hand on the desk, startling us both. No, Richard. This is about you and your pride. You can't stand that she proved you wrong. You can't stand that she doesn't need you anymore. The room went dead silent. Dad's eyes darted between us. He wasn't used to being challenged, not like this. For a moment, he looked smaller, like the bluster had cracked. But then he leaned forward, his voice low and venomous. If she doesn't give me what I deserve, I'll make sure everyone knows this family isn't as perfect as she pretends. Clients, investors, the press. I'll ruin her reputation. Mom gasped. You wouldn't. Oh, I would, Dad sneered. You'll see. And with that, he stood up, grabbed his papers, and walked out of my office as if he had just won. But I knew one thing. This battle was only getting started. I spent that night pacing my apartment until my feet ached. The city lights blinked through the window, but they couldn't outshine the tight, cold feeling in my chest. I kept replaying Dad's face, so sure, so entitled, and Mom's hand slamming on my desk like she was the only person who finally heard the truth. I called Maya, my COO, at midnight and explained everything in a rush. She didn't gasp or ask to call me back later. She said, "Get over here. Now." 2 minutes later, she was at my door with a travel mug and eyes that looked like they hadn't slept in weeks. A good leader makes other people move. Maya moved like a whole squad. First thing next morning, we sat down with a lawyer. I hated the idea of turning family into court papers, but Dad had already started. Counsel was blunt. You can't just tell him to go away. If he files something, you need to be prepared. We'll need documentation, proof of your ownership, proof your money, all of it. And we should start collecting evidence of his statements, because they'll matter. Their tone made it sound less like advice and more like a battle plan. I dug through every folder, every email, every contract. My company had started with one PayPal account and a desktop in a cramped rented room. Now we had client retainers, payroll records, and 3 separate LLCs. I printed everything, organized it, labeled it, and put it into a binder thick enough to be used as a doorstop. Each page felt like a small, stubborn victory. But legal strategy is only half the fight. Reputation is the other half, sometimes the louder one. Dad had threatened to tell people. He'd always loved gossip the way some people love crossword puzzles. He'd sit at the diner and talk about the family like a man reciting his best stories. If he actually started calling investors or clients and telling them his version, that could spiral. So Maya and I built a 2-pronged defense. Legal for the paperwork and PR for the people. We drafted a calm, factual letter to key clients explaining that there was a personal dispute and assuring them it would not affect contracts or deliverables. We tightened security around financials and set up watch alerts for any unusual inquiries. We also prepped a short, honest statement about the ownership structure we could release if someone started spreading lies. While we worked the kitchen of my childhood, the one where Mom used to set plates on the table, and where I'd practiced logo sketches on napkins, played in my head. I remembered Dad's jokes, how they slithered in at family events like the rain that always started when we were drying the laundry. I remembered how, after he laughed, I'd whispered Mom that I'd make something of myself. I'd promised quietly to the refrigerator magnets and the coffee stains, I will not be small because you say so. Mom came by the office twice that week. She kept apologizing, but her apologies were different now, less for what she'd allowed, and more like a steadying anchor for me. I should have told him off sooner, she said once, thumb tracing the spine of one of the binders. But I was scared. He's always been loud. You were quiet. But you were right. You don't owe him anything. The first real blow came 3 days later. My phone buzzed at 7 a.m. A text from an unknown number. We should talk. Richard claims you stole his investment. He's meeting with them today. My stomach dropped. I called Maya. She called our lawyer. I called the big client Richard had been hinting at for months, the one who'd once snubbed me at a trade show but later became one of our best accounts. Their voicemail was cold. We received a call this morning from someone alleging concerns about your company. We'll be in touch. My throat closed. That single sentence felt like a match thrown into dry grass. I leaned back in my chair and thought about the little versions of myself who had stayed up late teaching herself software, the girl who'd hand-painted business cards when we couldn't afford print runs. I thought about every stupid degree, taunt that had turned into fuel. I had built this company out of stubbornness and love, and now the man who'd mocked me wanted to watch it fall. Then my phone chimed again. Another message. This one from Dad. Make it easy on yourself. Give me half. Or watch what happens next. I stared at it until the words blurred, and somewhere under the blur, something steady and quiet shifted. This wasn't only about money. It was about who I would be if I let fear decide. I set my jaw and hit reply, only to stop before sending. There were lawyers to call, clients to reassure, and a fight I hadn't asked for but suddenly knew I would have to win. A knock sounded at my office door. Maya poked her head in, eyes sharp, hair messy, and behind her I saw a man I'd never expected to see in my conference room, the journalist who'd covered tech and startups for the city paper. He smiled too easily. I heard there's an interesting family story brewing, he said. Care to give me the inside scoop? The journalist's presence rattled me more than I expected. His pen hovered over a leather-bound notebook as he leaned forward with that practiced half-smile reporters use when they smell blood. I've been hearing things, he said. Your father claims he invested in your company and that you've been trying to cut him out. Care to comment? My stomach clenched. So he had already started. Maya jumped in before I could. That's a lie. He's never invested a cent. Everything here was built from scratch by her. We have records. The journalist raised his eyebrows, clearly enjoying the drama. Families are complicated. The public tends to sympathize with a parent who feels abandoned. I forced myself to stay calm, but my voice came out sharp. He didn't build this. I did. And if he's trying to rewrite history, then I guess I'll need to make the truth very public. The journalist scribbled quickly. So you're saying your father's claims are false? Not just false, I said, meeting his gaze. They're insulting. My father mocked me for years, called my education worthless, refused to support me when I needed it. And now that I've made something of myself, he's trying to take it away. That's not fatherly love. That's greed. The words hung in the room, heavier than I expected. Maya gave me a subtle nod. It was exactly what needed to be said. But the journalist wasn't done. He flipped a page. Would you be willing to go on record with that? Because I think people would be very interested in hearing your side of this story. And, he paused, lowering his voice, I have reason to believe your father is planning to hold a press conference tomorrow. My pulse spiked. A press conference. This wasn't just private manipulation anymore. He wanted a public spectacle. Mom, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, pressed her hand to her mouth. He's going to humiliate us all, she whispered. I looked at her, then at Maya, then back at the journalist. My father thought he could weaponize shame and family loyalty against me. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop playing defense. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw headlines. Ungrateful daughter betrays father. Family rift over money. Ambition over blood. I could almost hear Dad's smug voice rehearsing his victim act for the cameras. By morning, Maya had already drawn up strategy. If he's doing a press conference, we control the narrative first. We go public on our own terms. We share your story, not the one he's trying to spin. Mom sat at the kitchen table, wringing her hands. But won't that make things worse? Airing dirty laundry, like this. People don't forgive daughters who stand against their fathers. I squeezed her hand gently. People also don't forgive liars, Mom. And he's lying. If I stay silent, he wins. If I speak, at least I get to tell the truth. By noon, the journalist had sent me a draft of the article he was working on. He kept his tone balanced, but I could see how easily the narrative could tilt against me if I wasn't careful. So I made a decision. I would go on record with evidence. We gathered everything. Emails where Dad had ridiculed my education. Text messages where he called my degree garbage. Bank statements proving every cent came from my own work. Contracts with my first clients. Even a note he'd once scribbled on my graduation card. Don't expect me to bail you out when this degree fails you. When the journalist returned, I laid it all out in front of him. This is the story, I said. Not his fantasy about being my silent investor. This. Every insult. Every dismissal. Every record of me building without him. Publish this, and people will understand. He scanned the pages slowly, his usual smirk fading. I have to admit, he said, this is stronger than I expected. If you're willing to put your name to it, this could crush his credibility. I signed a release form without hesitation. The article went live that evening. Headline, she built a business from scratch. Now her father wants half. The story included my quotes, my documents, even Mom's testimony about how Dad had mocked me through school. It painted a picture not of an ungrateful child, but of a parent desperate to rewrite history. For a few hours, silence. Then my phone began buzzing nonstop, messages from colleagues, clients, even strangers. Most were supportive. You're brave. Good for you. Proud you spoke up. But one message stood out. It was from Dad. You've made a big mistake. You think the world's on your side? You'll regret embarrassing me like this. Watch what happens tomorrow. I stared at the screen, my throat tightening. He wasn't backing down. If anything, the gloves were about to come off. And tomorrow was his press conference. The next morning, I turned on the TV, and there he was, my father, standing at a podium outside a rented hall, reporters clustered around him like flies to sugar. He wore his best suit, the one he saved for weddings and funerals, and his expression was perfectly rehearsed, pain but noble, the martyr act he'd been perfecting for years. My daughter, he began, voice trembling just enough to sound authentic, would not have achieved anything without me. I sacrificed everything for her education. And now, instead of gratitude, I'm slandered. She owes me half of what she has built. That is only fair. He paused dramatically, letting the cameras catch his moist eyes. I am not asking for luxuries. I am asking for recognition. I am her father. I wanted to throw something at the screen. Recognition. This was the same man who called my diploma toilet paper, who skipped my graduation, who laughed when I stayed up all night working. Recognition, my ass. Maya paced the room like a general in war mode. He's leaning on sympathy. That plays well on TV. But we have the receipts. We need a counter. Right on cue, the journalist I had trusted published a follow-up piece, this time with video clips. One was a recording of Dad at a family barbecue years ago, holding a beer and saying she's wasting her life drawing cartoons. One day she'll come crawling back when reality hits. Another was a voicemail he'd left me during college. Don't come asking me for money when you're broke. You made your bed, now lie in it. The contrast was brutal. On one screen, the tearful father begging for fairness. On another, the sneering man dismissing his daughter's dreams. By afternoon, social media exploded. Hashtags popped up, hashtag stupid degree success, and hashtag not your half. My inbox overflowed with strangers sharing their own stories of parents who hadn't believed in them. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just my fight, it had tapped into something bigger. But not everyone was on my side. Some commentators called me cold, selfish, even ungrateful. They said children owed their parents everything. That stung, even though I knew they didn't know the whole story. Mom came to sit beside me on the couch. She slipped her hand into mine. He's spiraling, she said softly. This isn't about money anymore. It's about pride. He can't stand being the villain in his own story. I nodded, but my chest was heavy. Because she was right. And people like him didn't go down quietly. That evening, as I was about to shut off my phone, another message came through. This time, it wasn't from Dad. It was from his lawyer. We are preparing to file a formal lawsuit demanding 50% ownership of your company and assets. Consider this your final warning to settle privately. I read the words twice, then handed the phone to Maya. She exhaled sharply. Well, he's actually doing it. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't just noise or threats. My father was dragging me to court. The official letter arrived 2 days later, thick envelope, intimidating font, my name printed beside the words defendant. My hands shook as I slid it open. Inside was a formal lawsuit, Richard Lawson versus Emily Lawson. My own father had turned me into an opponent in black and white. The claims were outrageous. He insisted he had provided critical financial and emotional support during my education. He claimed I had promised to share future earnings in exchange for his sacrifice. Lies stacked on lies. I slammed the papers down on the table. Emotional support? He mocked me every step of the way. He didn't even give me a ride to campus. Maya scanned the documents, jaw tight. This is flimsy. He has no proof. But lawsuits like this can drag on for months. He's hoping you'll settle just to avoid the mess. Mom sat silently, her face pale. He'll tear this family apart, she whispered. I touched her shoulder. Mom, he already did. The weeks that followed were a blur of depositions and paperwork. My lawyer asked me to recount everything, every cruel comment, every rejection, every loan I took on my own. It was exhausting, reliving years of pain like evidence on a timeline. Meanwhile, Dad doubled down. He appeared on a local radio show, claiming he'd worked 3 jobs to put his daughter through school, and that I'd cut him out of the business out of greed. Hearing his voice twist the truth made my stomach churn. But then, something unexpected happened. People who knew us began speaking out. Old neighbors remembered him bragging that he wouldn't waste a penny on her dumb art degree. My college roommate testified how I worked 2 jobs to cover tuition. Even my first clients submitted statements about how I hustled alone to get their contracts. Piece by piece, his narrative unraveled. One evening, after another long day with lawyers, I sat in my office staring at the city skyline. My company, my dream, was on the line, not because of market crashes or bad decisions, but because my own father couldn't stand my success. Maya walked in, dropping 2 coffees on my desk. Bad day, she asked gently. I gave a hollow laugh. Just realizing my dad would rather see me bankrupt than admit he was wrong. She leaned against the desk, arms crossed. Then don't let him win. You've got the truth. He's got nothing but ego. And ego doesn't hold up in court. I wanted to believe her. But deep down, I knew Dad had one last card to play. He always did. And I was right. Because a week before the trial date, I learned who his star witness was. It wasn't a lawyer. It was my uncle, the one man in the family I thought was still on my side. When my lawyer told me Dad had called my uncle to testify, my heart sank. Uncle Mark had always been the quiet one at family gatherings, the one who slipped me $20 for gas when Dad made snide comments about my art hobby. I thought if anyone understood, it was him. But the day of the hearing, there he was, sitting next to my father, whispering in his ear like an ally. When he took the stand, Dad's lawyer asked, "Mr. Lawson, would you say Richard supported his daughter financially during college?" Mark cleared his throat. Yes. He helped cover her living expenses. He kept a roof over her head. It felt like a knife. Technically true. I had lived at home the first year of school. But that roof came with constant mockery, slammed doors, and shouted insults. Shelter wasn't the same as support. When it was our turn, my lawyer stood. "Mr. Lawson, did Richard ever provide money for tuition?" Mark hesitated. "No, not tuition. But he provided food and housing." "And were you aware that Emily worked 2 jobs to cover her tuition and supplies?" Mark shifted in his seat. "I suppose. Yes. And were you also aware that Richard frequently ridiculed her choice of degree, calling it useless and a waste of money?" The courtroom went silent. Mark looked at me, then at Dad, then back at me. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Finally, he muttered, "Yes, I remember that." It was the crack we needed. Over the next hour, my lawyer dismantled Dad's claims one by one. We showed receipts, contracts, bank statements, text messages, voicemails. We played recordings of Dad's mocking words. Piece by piece, the judge's expression hardened. By the time closing arguments finished, I could see it in everyone's faces. Dad's case was collapsing. The ruling came swift and clear. The court finds no merit in Richard Lawson's claims. All assets and ownership remain solely with Emily Lawson. Furthermore, Richard Lawson is ordered to pay the defendant's legal fees. I sat frozen, barely breathing, as the words sank in. Then Mom squeezed my hand, tears in her eyes. "You did it. You won." Dad stormed out without looking at me, his pride shattered more than his case. For once, he had no clever lines, no smirk, no thunder in his voice. Just silence. Weeks later, I stood on the porch of Mom's house, the one I had bought her, watching her tend to her garden. The sun was warm, the air smelled of lavender, and for the first time in years, I felt free. I had defended everything I'd built. Not just my company, but my dignity, my degree, my dream. And while Dad had tried to take half of everything, what he really lost was the last piece of me willing to see him as a father.